You can tell I'm not the chairman, Tom Richards. He is on the line, nor our vice chair, Nancy Miller, who is out of the country, but I believe also on the line. So I will be the acting chair this morning. So calling the meeting to order. Mr. Secretary, would you read the roll?
Thank you. Acting Chair Shank.
Present.
Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller.
Here.
Assembly Member Arembula. Director Perea.
Here.
Director Gilmetti. Director Escutia. Director Williams.
Here.
Senator Gonzalez. Director Cohen. Acting Chair Shank, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Member Gilmetti, would you do the honors of leading us in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we go to public comment, two happy announcements to make. One, our member Emily Cohn has given birth to an additional member of our board, baby Eleanor, beautiful baby Eleanor. So congratulations to Emily on the birth of her daughter. And today, although he's not here with us in person, it's Brian Kelly's birthday. So on behalf of the entire board and the audience, Brian, we wish you a very happy birthday. All right, so we'll turn to public comment. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Acting Chair Shank. Good morning, everybody. Before we begin public comment for the High-Speed Rail Board of Directors meeting, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who have joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called upon in the order we have received your card. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on your screen to allow the microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining the meeting by phone, we will call on you on the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn, speak clearly. Please slowly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you're representing. Acting Chair Shank, we do not have any in-person comment.
No in person. How about via Zoom?
Online, we do have. Our first speaker will be Roland.
Thank you. Roland, are you there?
Good morning, Director Shank. This
Good
is
morning.
Roland O'Brien. So this morning, what I would like to do is to attract your attention to the startling difference between the quality of the Finance and Audit Committee meeting minutes, which quite frankly are outstanding, and that of the board meeting minutes, which point to various sections of the transcript, which is nowhere to be found. In closing, I'm wondering if it would be possible to improve the board meeting minutes to either summarize what was said or at the very minimum, provide hyperlinks pointing directly to the specific sections of the transcript. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any others?
Yes. Their next speaker is David Schwagel.
Thank you. Mr. Schwagel, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Great.
you.
All right. So David, D-A-V-I-D, Schwegel, S-C-H-W-E-G-E-L, spelled like Schweizer around the bagel, underscoring the value in workshops. Check with James Corliss, the Executive Director of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, how those workshops play out as he brings in speakers from all over the nation. Specifically, I recommend a workshop on collaboration with Brightline West to see if there's any way possible we can make Palmdale to Burbank a collaborative effort. Let's face it, Palmdale to Burbank is the engineering and public relations challenge of the century. And I'm sure we remember the hundreds of people who come down to participate in public comment who were opposed to how that project section was being managed. Specifically, since it's such a huge leap, it would be helpful if Palmdale to Burbank was a collaborative effort between Brightline West and the authority. Specifically, what this means is that Brightline West will be able to provide a one-seat ride between Los Angeles and Las Vegas without having to share right-of-way with Metrolink. So that being said, workshops are highly recommended, especially one on Palmdale to Burbank, the engineering and public relations challenge of the century. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwagel. Are there any other?
Our next speaker is Laura Uden.
Good morning, Laura Uden. Thank you to the board. I appreciate the continued opportunities to speak in front of you on many issues, mostly related to small business concerns, as I'm on the High Speed Rail Business Advisory Council representing disabled veterans. I'm calling today because of the Trainsets RFQ that is coming out. I don't know if that's going through. I know it was intended to go through an approval today. I want to speak about RFQs in general and their impact on small businesses. On this particular one, I appreciate that the small business goals are laid out in the RFQ. However, they appear to be the old small business goals, not the new ones that I believe have been either agreed to or approved for the high-speed rail, which included a 25% goal for small business and a 5% goal for micro business, neither of which I see listed here in that fashion. I see the old 30-10-3 goals, and I'm concerned that we're not implementing the goals that we spent over a decade trying to get modified to more accurately address and support the very small end of the small business spectrum. And so I'm concerned about that. And as I look at the RFQ, I also don't see anything related to inclusion of those particular small business goals or the construction of the teams that are bidding on this in the RFQ. And I'd like to state that if we don't put those goals in the RFQ phase, I realize there'll be an RFP to follow. But what happens is those teams get formed, and they get formed without very many small businesses and without an opportunity even for small businesses to speak to the potential primes until the RFP phase, which is too late. I've had many instances where I've applied for being on teams or tried to get on teams for design build contracts or install contracts like this. And the primes say to us, well, we don't really need to talk to you right now because we don't have to sort that out till later. And that's much too late for us and for them. And what happens is they'll end up with a team that doesn't include a lot of people that could have otherwise benefited the authority and the program. So I'd like you to reconsider adding those into the scoring criteria. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could we make sure those questions are answered during that presentation?
We will.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Yes.
Our next speaker is Pamela Martinez.
Hi, good morning. My name is Pamela Martinez. That's Pamela Martinez. I am the Community Energy Resilience Project Manager with the Climate Center, and I am calling in support of agenda item number 4. And I'd like to thank the authority for pursuing a plan to develop a behind-the-meter strategy of solar PV and battery storage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kate Unger.
Good morning. My name is Kate Unger, Kateunger, and I'm speaking on behalf of the California Solar and Storage Association. I just have a brief comment. We support the High-Speed Rail Authority's efforts to pursue solar and storage to power the train with 100% clean energy to assure a resilient infrastructure solution and support California's energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Frank Quintero.
Good morning, authority members. My name's Frank Quintero, FrankQuintero. I'm the Deputy City Manager for the City of Merced, and a very long time staffer for the city of Merced on the high-speed rail project. Just want to report to you that concerning the Merced Integrated Multimodal Station, we submitted in a letter in support for the mega grant, partnering with High Speed Rail, ACE, and the San Joaquins. That was turned in by staff on behalf of Mayor Matthew Serrato. And I'm also happy to report our youth council wants to get involved with California high-speed rail activities. And they too submitted in a letter of support for the mega grant application. And we look forward to our continued partnership and integrating our youth council into these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Acting Chair Shank, that appears to be the last
That-
person for public comment.
Thank you. I just want to comment both to those who have taken the time to offer us public comment and those who think about it, that the board and the staff listens and takes into consideration everything that is said, and particularly those who have offered suggestions. They will be responded to either in the course of our meeting today or at some other time. But I want to assure everyone that you are heard and are listened to. So thank you. With that, I'd like to move to agenda item number 1, which is approval of the July 27th meeting minutes.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary?
Acting Chair Shank,
Yes.
Chair Richards. Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti, Director Escutia, Director Williams,
Abstain due to absence.
Director Cohen. Acting Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our next action item, item number 2 on the agenda with Mr. Armistead.
Good morning.
Yeah, and Bruce, if possible, if you could incorporate into your presentation, perhaps a response to what you heard in public comment.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll do that at the end if that's all right.
Thank you.
We are pleased to update the board on the progress of the Trainsets and related services RFQ and seek board approval to release the RFQ. This represents the first step in a 2-step procurement that will lead to the selection of a contractor deemed to have best value for the authority. Next slide, please. Today's presentation will cover the following items: talk about the objective, Trainset procurement scope review, Trainset procurement timeline, relationship of Trainsets to the tracking systems, and board actions. Next slide, please. We're seeking board approval to release a request for qualifications for high-speed train sets and services to industry. We are targeting the release of the RFQ this month and will evaluate the SOQs received in response to the RFQ to create a short list of manufacturers capable of delivering high-speed train sets. The SOQs are due on November 14th, 2023. It is important to note that no funding is required for the RFQ process. The timely release of the RFQ and subsequent development of the short list of contractors will position the authority to be able to release the request for proposals early next year. We will request the board approval of the short list and the request for proposals once funding sources have been confirmed. The train sets and related services contract will be delivered as a supply maintain contract with an estimated budget of $561 million as identified in the 2023 project update report. Next slide, please. We presented a suite of rail systems and train set contract packages at the July board meeting. The train set contract is referred to as Package 3. You may recall during a prior meeting, we reviewed supporting contracts and how each of their respective responsibilities and support the certification process and will be separate contracts. Next slide, please. The schedule is currently being refined and will be presented at a future meeting. This refinement will spread the procurement in a way that acknowledges the capacity of staff. Initiating the train set procurement process will allow the authority to meet the Federal Railroad Administration Hour Grant December 2028 dynamic testing deadline and to achieve operational availability in the Central Valley. This contract approach is aligned with the 2023 project update report. Next slide, please. The scope of the contract includes procurement of 6 train sets capable of operating at 220 miles per hour and tested at 242 miles per hour. The 2 prototypes will support the static and dynamic testing scheduled for 2028. 4 additional production train sets will support revenue operations of the early operating segment Merced to Bakersfield by the end of 2030. This contract will procure a driving simulator and will require train set contractor to develop design criteria for the maintenance facilities and tracking systems contracts. Next slide, please. Train set procurement scope overview. In addition to the train sets and driving simulator, the contractor will be required to participate in the testing and commissioning of facilities, track and systems, and support the certification and commissioning of the train sets. Maintain each train set for 30 years and operate and maintain the facilities which are being built by others. Next slide, please. The authority's timeline from RFQ to revenue service is projected to be 7 years. The authority's train set procurement is programmed to span 1 year from the RFQ to contractor selection. We are seeking board approval to release the RFQ this quarter and position the authority to be able to initiate an RFP soon after funding sources are identified. As we look to the Amtrak high-speed train set procurement, there are lessons learned regarding train set testing that we will put into practice for our procurement. First, we will prioritize the early development of validated model that simulates the vehicle track interaction, and we will do this with FRA's involvement. Second, we will co-locate the team responsible for performing the vehicle track interaction testing with the authority personnel to drive accountability and efficiencies. Next slide, please. During industry outreach sessions, we were advised of the benefits of having the procurement of train sets aligned with the track and systems procurement. This approach will allow the selected train set contractor to identify critical interfaces to perform maintenance, to inform maintenance facilities, tracking systems, and stations design. The most important is that this approach reduces the risk to the authority by confirming that the interface and integration requirements will be complete and without conflicts. Next slide, please. This procurement will be the first procurement of 220-mile-an-hour train sets that are compliant with FRA Tier 3 and Buy America requirements. While the procurement schedule we have developed is reasonable, we need to adhere to our deadlines for RFQ and future RFP releases to have the train sets on property to achieve operational availability and the support trial running in December of 2029. In addition to preparing for an authority-led procurement, we are also evaluating opportunities to participate in a joint procurement. There are several benefits to the authority should it be able to participate in the joint procurement, including decreased costs attributed to the economies of scale, an increase in the base order of the train sets, which will drive competition, and the ability to spread non-recurring costs over a larger quantity of train sets. In addition, a joint procurement of train sets promotes interoperability. Next slide, please. To achieve our train set procurement goals for the program, we are seeking board approval to release the RFQ package with a target release date timeframe of third quarter 2023. Upon creation of the short list of qualified firms, we will return to the board to seek approval of the shortlisted firms and also seek approval to release the RFP. This target release timeframe is the first quarter of 2024, contingent on the identification of funding sources. Thank you for your consideration of this item, and I am happy to hear your comments and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Perea had a question during the public comment period.
Thank you for the presentation and thank you yesterday for the briefing. It cleared a lot of questions up that I had, some pretty exciting stuff. Just first, maybe the question that was asked by the individual on the phone.
Regarding small business?
Yes.
Yes, we're intending to revise the scoring criteria to include a small business option or criteria. We're going to revise the criteria to include small business as a scoring option.
Yeah, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes,
Just to add
Mr.
to
Camacho.
your question about that, the CEO has, or his designee has the authority to authorize any necessary modifications to the RFQ during the procurement process. I would like to make a motion that the draft RFQ prior to release to include a scored component of the statement of qualifications that addresses the offer's plan to meet the authority's small business program goals, including small disadvantaged and veteran-owned businesses. That will help ensure that they're able to participate. I think that one of the comments made by the public speakers was that during this process, by the time the RFP is released, teams have already been formed and they're basically excluded from participating in any meaningful way. So if we are to include them in the RFQ and then also in the RFP, once the selected firms are shortlisted, we'll have a better opportunity to gain with the participation of more small disadvantaged firms.
I second that motion and I have a question for Mr. Camacho.
Okay, but first, you're offering that as an amendment to the resolution? Is that correct? Okay, and you're seconding?
Yes,
Martha, okay.
I am seconding I will second that motion, but I would like, for clarification purposes, Mr. Camacho, you're indicating that we should add a scored component to the question of diversity and procurement, basically. How many points are we talking about? What is your intent?
I think that's something that we still need to discuss. When we look at the past procurements, we've seen that they have been the difference between the winning score and the score that scored second or third are probably within 1, 2, 3 points. So I think that even by acknowledging that we are seeking this type of involvement and aggressive effort, that we're supporting what the governor has asked us to do, as well as our CEO is promoting to do with small businesses. This will ensure that we are committed to doing that as well.
All right. I thank you, first of all, for bringing up the issue, Commissioner Camacho, because I think that as an authority, this will be the first RFQ of many in the near future. And we either are committed to diversity in procurement or we're not. And I hope that we are committed to it. And this is our opportunity right now to really show that commitment by making this an element that is scored and part of the procurement process. And then after that, it's frankly two players are operating here, not only us as a high-speed rail authority, but also everybody out there in the audience who's watching, who represents some major private corporation. You also have commitments, to diversity, and you show those commitments in your ESG end of the year reports. And so now you're really going to see firsthand that we're serious about this. So I hope that it's two stakeholders, the High-Speed Rail Authority as well as the private sector have got to be committed to this, as well as staff. Because ultimately it's going to come down to enforcement. And if staff is not committed, then this conversation is moot. So I really do hope that the commitment lies there. And with that, I would definitely second the motion.
As usual, well stated.
Could I finish my question?
Yes,
Yeah,
Henry.
please. Okay, thank you. All right, and I agree with what you both have presented. Just wanted to go back to our discussion yesterday,
Yes.
and especially considering that we have a December 2028 FRA deadline to have these strengths tested. I mean, there's so many moving pieces that have to move in together to make
Yes.
sure that happens. Going to your slide on page 4, which is the overview of packaging and anticipated dates. We have package 1 through 4. And of course, we're moving 3 today, but I just want, if you could briefly talk about the additional contracts portion of it. There's 4 components: the independent cost estimator, construction manager, integration support, and independent safety. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
And if that's going to be one company, one entity overseeing all, or if they're going to be separate. And if these 4 activities function as an umbrella over packages 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the last question tied to that is will these folks be brought on ASAP so that they will be a part of the discussions and designs, et cetera, for what
Okay.
goes into 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Right. Yeah, the supporting contracts that you mentioned, we will be bringing those.
Madam Chair, I don't know if I don't mean to make a point of order, but I know we have a motion and a second before us right now. Is this related to that discussion of that motion and second, or is this a separate? It is.
I believe it.
Yeah, it's tied to the whole item.
Yeah.
No, I got it, but this is a specific motion and a second related to adding a provision to the resolution related.
Oh, you want to
to
vote on that
the
first and
procurement.
continue the discussion?
I just wonder if we should finish that discussion before.
Okay.
We
Well,
move-
what happened was that Henry was interrupted.
Yeah, by the
And so we
motion,
wanted
yeah.
to be courteous to,
Okay.
but if you don't mind
No,
waiting.
that's
and we'll
fine.
do-
Yeah.
Okay, but I do have one.
And I
Anybody
just have a
else?
question about that.
You do.
The
Okay.
motion and the second too. Yeah. So go
Please
ahead.
go ahead then.
So no, my question, so you did state that it was the staff's intention, I think, to accomplish what
Yes.
the motion. So I just want to make sure that we're consistent. Do you see any difference between what we propose, what's been proposed as a motion to be added, and what your intentions were anyway?
No, I don't.
Okay, that's helpful.
But you do welcome it.
I do welcome it. Yes.
Are
Yes,
there
ma'am.
any other member comments or questions? Anyone on the phone that would like to make a comment or question? No.
I guess I would only say, Chair Shank, the clarification I think is important for the reasons that we heard from both from Director Scuccia and Director Camacho. And I do believe in the preparation of this and in frankly other RFQs that we've looked at, this clarification will really make it easier for those who are responding to it to understand clearly what it is that we're looking for. And to put a number to a part of the scoring number to this specific area, I think is a huge step forward and will be very helpful for both sides.
Agreed. Thank you for that, Chairman Richards. Just one quick
Yes.
question, please, Bruce. Laura Uten, who made the comment, said that what was in there there was old criteria, and we're looking for the new criteria. I'm assuming that you understand that, of course, and that will be
Yes.
incorporated in what we do here.
So,
Yeah.
Alicia.
Yes, Alicia, our
Madam-
council has a comment.
Yes, Madam Director, the board hasn't actually approved those new standards yet. So Ms. Uden is correct. There's been a lot of work done. I think the intent is to bring those standards to this board, ideally next month. But until.
Well,
the
then
board
how will it
approves them-
be incorporated into the motion and amendment that we just heard? Because
Well, the motion.
Well, I think we could
amendment is to-
identify subject to the criteria that will be presented to the board.
And the the motion is really that these, as part of the RFQ, these companies put forward a plan to meet this. And so I think they can lay out a plan to meet what's currently been approved.
So
But by
when will
the
it come
time,
before the board?
let me say, by the time they're doing that, you guys will have seen the new numbers and
Okay.
approve them or not if you don't
Yes.
agree.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're going to be dealing with that. Okay. If there are no other
So can we
comments or.
get back to the answer to my questions?
Well,
We
we're-
have
we're
the
doing
motion and second
first, and
outstanding.
then, yes,
Okay.
we will.
Okay.
But if there are no other questions or comments on the motion and the amendment, then we'll entertain a vote on that. Okay.
Can-
If
Can we make the record super clear?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, if you would read
Yes.
the amendment into the record.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the amendment is to add another paragraph to the existing resolution that would say, as paragraph 2, that staff shall amend the draft RFQ prior to release to include a scored component of the statement of qualifications that addresses an offeror's plan to meet the authority's small business program goals, including small, disadvantaged, and disabled veteran business entities.
Yes.
Yes.
And so this would be incorporated into a resolution 23-06.
Correct.
All right.
Okay, so we're all on the same page? Okay. Oh,
Just a point of clarification, are we voting on the resolution itself?
No.
yes.
No.
Oh,
No,
the
right now the
amendment
motion.
and then the resolution. Is that
That's
right,
the
Alicia?
resolution.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Secretary, if you'd call the roll.
Acting Chair Shank,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti, Director Escutia,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen.
Thank you. Did you just post the underlying resolution? Okay, so Henry, I think your comment is towards the resolution.
Yes, now we're
Okay,
back to.
yeah, thank you.
Yes. Well, the supporting contracts have their own distinct responsibilities during the certification process. The ISA, the Independent Safety Assessor, assures that we're mitigating all the hazards and risks to their lowest possible level. And that ISA activity will continue from design all the way through testing and commissioning until we reach revenue service. The integrator contract will assure that all the designs are integrated properly and assure that objective evidence is recorded in our database. So that's the integrator. He will assure that the designs are integrated properly and any manufacturing and construction. All that integration happens with our integrator to be hired.
Okay.
The construction manager, those are our eyes and ears in the field and in the facility. So they will confirm that the requirements are being met in the facility. They will do a report. And what's not there is the rail systems engineering contractor, which is our requirements manager. They'll help us to assure that the design requirements and the construction requirements are being met by checking those requirements back to the specifications. So that's the way those all work together toward certification. We have the manufacturer, then we have the checker in the lab, then we had a verifier, which will be our requirements manager, and we have the safety assessor that assures that everything is being done safely in a way consistent with our threat and vulnerability analysis and the hazard analysis and all those logs as we mitigate the hazards. The independent safety assessor confirms that the design mitigates the hazard and the risk is transferred to the right place. And then the next step in construction or manufacturing, the hazards are reduced again. And then in the last step, we write a rule to mitigate any residual risks that might be occurring for a particular part. And a good example is a door on a car. The door is not supposed to open while the car is above 0 speed. So we design that door not to be open. If it's 0 speed, somebody verifies that, yes, that design works. Then we do the testing in the factory. The car's at 0 speed, the door can only open at that time. And then we do dynamic testing. We run the train, make sure that the door doesn't open. And then the independent safety assessor is active throughout that process, along with the early train operator that is writing the rule book all the way throughout that process. The requirements manager is assuring that the design requirements are being met all the way throughout that process. So we have a number of checks and balances that assure that we're building a safe railroad for 220-mile-an-hour operation. It follows the European normatives, which is what I've talked about in this room before when I came and brought the rail systems engineering contract. So the ENs, which are used, don't let the name fool you, it's used in Europe and in Asia to bring high-speed trains into certification. I've been working with the FRA to adopt those normatives in what we're doing for certification. They do exist in the CFRs under Texas Central's rule of a particular applicability. So FRA is familiar with this process, but we're working with them to assure the process that I just mentioned to you will confirm that we've met all the requirements of the CFRs. And we're doing that by the process of the European normatives.
Okay.
CFRs are design-based, the ENs are the process-based.
Okay, the last two questions, just to confirm, these 4 activities, will when we go out to RFP or RFQ for these 4 activities, will we be asking one person, one company to do all 4? Or will they be done separately? And if they're done separately, who will oversee all of their activities to coordinate? And the second question is there any value in any one of these 4 or all 4 being a part of design and discussion of 1, 2, 3, and 4 before we actually go out for them? Is there value in having any components of these teams as a part of those discussions for design and all?
Okay, I'll answer the first question first. The integration team that's staff here at the authority will oversee the interfaces and the integration of the work of the contractors. So we have a team that includes Dominic Rulins and myself and a few others that will oversee the work that everyone's doing. The requirements manager assures again that the requirements are being met. The independent safety assessor assures that the safety requirements are being met, and they have a lot channeled directly to FRA. So our oversight within the authority, me and my team will be overseeing all the work that's being done. And your second question was, why can't they be combined into?
Yes.
Because each of these have separate and distinct responsibilities in the certification process. They have to report to, for lack of a better term, a different stock price. So I can't have the person that's checking this person report, you can't have, somebody can't check their own homework.
Right.
Somebody else has to check the homework.
Okay. And the last question, just is any value in bringing them on, any component of these 4 on now to help in design or just discussions of 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, that's exactly the procurement strategy that we have, which is bringing on the right disciplines at the right time.
Got it. Okay.
The next time I come before you will be in the order in which we think they need to happen to support the requirements management, to support the design, the vehicle track interaction, et cetera.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And we are committed to small business, my staff is, and inclusion.
Thank you for that. So now, any other comments or questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion. There's a
Second.
motion and a second.
Question. You're talking about to approve the resolution?
As
As
amended,
amended,
as
okay.
amended, yes. Any other comments? No? Then, Mr. Secretary, call. roll.
Acting Chair Shank,
Yes,
Chair Richard,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti, Director Escutia, Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen. Acting Chair Shank, the motion carries.
motion carries, and thank you very much, Bruce. Excellent report, and you heard our whole board's strong commitment to small business and diversity. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll Move on now to agenda item number 3. Boris Lipkin, if you would come to the microphone, please.
Good morning, Acting Chair Shank, Chair Richards, and members of the board. My name is Boris Lipkin. I'm the Northern California Regional Director, and I'm here to give you an informational item and update on our regional updates as we do these from time to time. Just as a kind of launching off point, the last time I was before the board was August of last year when we were asking you to approve the final environmental document for the San Francisco to San Jose project section. So my report's going to focus on things that have happened since that time. So if we go to the next slide. I'll start off by just giving a little bit of an overview of our Northern California team sections and status of those. I'll talk a little bit about our collaborations and partnerships that we have in the region, and then a little bit about our outreach. So this is our small but mighty team in Northern California. We have a combination of program management staff, planning, outreach, communications, and of course myself and Morgan Galley as the leadership team for the region. Next slide, please. And then when we talk about Northern California, and I'm sure that folks will remember the 2 project sections that we talked about last year, but we kind of the about 150 miles of the alignment starts.
I'm sorry, Boris,
Sorry.
could you speak closer to
Oh,
the
yeah.
mic so people in the back can hear?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm not very tall, so I don't think that I was already
Well, these
carrying.
mics are not very sensitive. You have to
But
sort of
I'll get a little
swallow it.
closer. Thank you,
Yeah.
Chair Shank. So our Northern California sections start in San Francisco at the Salesforce Transit Center. That's our northern terminus. We then continue on the pink line, which is the Caltrain corridor, which we're currently helping to electrify. We have additional improvements that we need for high-speed rail service in that corridor. That was part of our San Francisco to San Jose project section. We then continue that blended system down to Gilroy and modernization of that line, which is currently owned by Union Pacific. That's the green on the chart. And then we turn to the east and get onto a dedicated alignment going through Pacheco Pass, including our 2 tunnel sections, Tunnel 1 and Tunnel 2, and then getting out towards Madera, basically, and the Central Valley Y, where we have our current construction expansions happening. So if you click one more time, just to kind of give the update on the status of our 2 project sections. The board approved the environmental documents and we finalized the notice of determination, which is the end of the CEQA process in April and August of last year. The board then asked us to finalize the record of decision, which is the federal NEPA process. And we did that in June and October. And then in terms of where things stand since that time, in San Francisco to San Jose, we had 3 entities file litigation. We have currently stayed 2 of those in order to work collaboratively with those entities to resolve the issues that they raised. And we're working on the 3rd one as well. And then in San Jose and Merced, we didn't have any litigation, but we do have 2 tolling agreements that we're continuing to work through to resolve the last kind of bits of questions that we have in that project section. So we've continue to engage with those stakeholders, and I think we're making good progress in those conversations. Next slide, please. The other thing that's been really important for us in Northern California, and I know the boards over the last few months talked many times about the federal state partnership program and the importance of those federal grant applications. And so of course you'll remember that there's 2 applications that we submitted. So application 1 is our really big one. That's the Central Valley construction, the Trainsets, et cetera. But if you click again, kind of for Northern California, the focus is really on the application 2. That one lets us, if we are awarded, take the next steps in advancing our work, advancing the design, specifically in the San Jose and Merced project section, obviously also in Bakersfield to Palmdale on the southern end of the alignment. And for us, that's the critical path. That's being able to do the geotechnical studies we need to do in the Pacheco Pass and really take the next steps in preparing to look at expansion towards the Bay Area. And so we're eagerly awaiting the results of that federal grant application, and that will really drive the amount of work and the type of work that we can do in 2024 for Northern California. Next slide, please. Just one note for the board, when we submitted that federal state grant application, the Bay Area really came out in full support for us. And so we had over 60 letters of support, everybody from the local cities, the region itself, transit partners, business, labor, environmental groups. there's an incredibly strong coalition that really wants to see high-speed rail come to the Bay Area. And so they were excited for both us, hopefully receiving federal funds towards the Central Valley, but also the second application of the path towards advancing the work in the region. And so there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of backing that we have that we really want to continue to show that we're moving the program forward in the region. Next slide, please. And then kind of last update on things that have happened in the region in the last few months is we actually received a series of awards. So first, the Women in Transportation Seminar. I think Brian might have mentioned in his CO report that we were selected for their international organization as the Employer of the Year. We also received the same award for the San Francisco Bay Area chapter. And of course, that shows just the strong commitment to women leaders that we have in this organization from top to bottom. We also received an award from the American Planning Association, their Northern California section, which was focused on advancing diversity and social change in honor of Paul Davidoff. That one was for our environmental justice work in our San Jose to Merced project section, and was part of the approval of the environmental documents last year, where we really took an affirmative step in advancing that. And then the last two awards were for our public information, so from PR News and the California Association of Public Information Officers. And that was for, if you click one more time, we have an flyover video that we created, which has been our #1 watched YouTube video on our YouTube channel, which has now, I think, over 120,000 views. So people are incredibly interested in the project, and it's being recognized quite broadly. So switching to updates on our work with
Yes, yes, a question before he goes into the
Sure.
updates. If I can take you back to slide number 4.
Yep.
And I'm paying close attention to the pink lines that show basically Caltrain electrification.
Yep.
You kind of briefly mentioned about Millbrae. Are those litigation issues already taken care of so that this can be a seamless process? Can you even answer that
Chief
question?
Counsel.
This will be a good closed session conversation
All
for
right.
next month.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So the answer is no? No, you're still not ready. Okay, all right, all right, all right.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So if we can go to the next section, really focused on, as I mentioned, we have a number of places where we're plugged into regional collaborations and multi-agency partnerships that we have. So those are also all advancing in their own ways. And so I want to kind of tick through some of those and give you the updates on where each of those stands. So the first one is with the Trans-Bay Joint Powers Authority. This is a JPA that we are a part of. I serve on their board at the board's behest. And this is the agency charged with the Salesforce Transit Center in San Francisco and the tunnel that was formerly called the Downtown Extension, now called the Portal, that'll connect the Salesforce Transit Center to the Caltrain corridor. So we have an existing MOU with a number of local agencies to collaboratively advance that project. We've extended that to December 2023. And the goal of that is to, as the project advances through its design and federal process, to then be able to update the governance accordingly for the next stages of development. So if you just the alignment there is shown on the bottom right for this project. But if you go to the next slide, please. So there's 2 phases to their program. So the phase 1 was the Salesforce Transit Center. That's already been completed. It includes the train box underneath the transit center, which is on the bottom right photo. That's for our service and Caltrain to be able to come in and serve that facility. So the next part is the portal, the tunnel extension. And so that project has recently completed their 30% design. And just in the last 2 weeks, they have taken the step to go into the next stage called engineering as part of their federal grant application. They're looking for about $4 billion in federal transit money for that project. And so there's a process set up for that, and they've taken kind of the next big step in that process. The total project cost, as they've been doing their risk reviews, just like any other project going through the process, is now $7.5 billion. They're about 75 they've identified and been able to secure, including the federal grant that they're pending on, about 75% of that. And of course, the last 25 is going to be the hardest part. So that's their kind of target over the next couple of years as they go through that federal grant process, is they'll need to be able to figure out the last 25% of the funding to actually build the project. But we are very much at the table. And as I mentioned, we're going to be updating the governance model for the next stages and as they're going towards procurement and then into construction, how all of the agencies have a role in helping to advance the project. Next slide, please. Next one, kind of going down the corridor, is Caltrain electrification. So I know this is one that the board has been following closely for a long time, but this is really an important project for us. It lays the foundation for most of the infrastructure that we're going to need between San Francisco and San Jose. And you can see the timeline on the bottom. They started construction in 2017, and at this point, they're very close to having finished the major construction pieces. Now they're beginning to test and commission their new electric trains, so that their trains have arrived on site. They actually did a recent public tour to show those off to people, and there's lots of excitement for what a new electric train looks like. And of course, we're following that very closely because it's very important for us to make sure that both their trains are successful, our trains are able to use the corridor as well. Next slide, please. The other update that I want to make the board aware of is as part of our Proposition 1A contribution towards the electrification project, we have our contract, which is the Project Management and Funding Agreement that was developed back in 2018. And it really kind of governs both our contribution and provides for what our rights are and abilities to use the corridor later on. So we're finalizing an amendment to that because as many projects, they have had both schedule and cost issues. So you can see the revisions that they made to the budget was about another $400 million, and they've pushed the schedule out a couple of years. So we need to update our project and cost and budget information in that agreement to match that new project schedule and new project information. They were fortunately able to identify new funding sources for that extra $400 million. So there's no additional authority funds that they need to complete the project. But it's still an important amendment for us to go through the process. It requires Department of Finance approval. And so we're very close to achieving that and being able to continue to make the necessary contributions towards electrification. Next slide, please. So continuing to move south along the corridor, at Diridon Station, this is sort of where a lot of things come together. There's, of course, the electrification of the corridor today. There's our environmental clearance, which covers the improvements needed at Diridon Station for high-speed rail. There's the BART project that's coming in, and so the dashed black line on the graphic. And then there's all the planning for the land use and transit-oriented development with the Diridon Station area plan, including Google's project right in that vicinity. And so a few years ago, we started a process of creating an integrated station concept plan with partner agencies. And so just to give a quick update on where that is, if you go to the next one, and I know Director Gilmetti was on our committee overseeing that yesterday. So, but the planning work is continuing. The vision is kind of to have an integrated land use transit-oriented development, station design, and access planning process. They developed an original concept a couple of years ago, and that's now being further refined to define the project, really identify through a business case what its benefits and costs are, and then align the organizational governance approach so the project can move into an environmental clearance process. That's their next step, and make sure that there's a path forward for how that will be overseen by the collective 5 partner agencies and what the roles and responsibilities are between each of us in that process. Next slide, please. And then again, continuing south in Gilroy, we're continuing to work with the city on station area planning. So this has been kind of a strengthened collaboration that we've had, really focusing on aligning both the city and authority goals when it comes to the integration of land use and transportation. I think in Gilroy, the station can really transform that community, and we want to make sure we're working closely with the city. So we've had our planning team, Meg and others, been very engaged in this, making sure that we're working collaboratively. There's been a series of workshops focused on this question, and then we've also had folks out to the construction sites to really get them a firsthand experience of what our construction looks like. Also have a chance for them to interact with folks in Fresno and other places to understand kind of how those cities have worked with us and what that kind of the cities that are a little bit further ahead, what that means for Gilroy down the line. And then the last kind of corridor-wide effort has been, and we talked about this last year during the environmental clearance process, is there's a huge emphasis on grade separations in the corridor. So there's over 20 of these at various stages of planning and development, usually led by, or not usually, they're all led by the local jurisdictions in collaboration with the rail agencies. And so just as a reminder, if you click the first one, we did fund and contribute towards the 25th Avenue grade separation project. This was our first bookend project that actually finished its construction. So what you see there is the rebuilt Hillsdale Station and the grade separation there. So that's been put into service in 2021. That's the first piece of high-speed rail funded infrastructure that's in use today for rail service. But also a recent announcement from the state in terms of new investments that are being made in the corridor. So as part of last year's Budget Act, there was an appropriation of $350 million towards grade separations across the state. A number of cities applied up and down the Caltrain corridor, and in total, they received about $110 million for the Broadway grade separation project, which has been a long time one that we've advocated for in Burlingame. It helps with the most dangerous rail crossing in the state at this point, as well as an important facility that alleviates our need to do some improvement work in that area. Mountain View got funds for Ranksdorf and Castro streets to fill the funding pot for those two grade separations. And then Palo Alto got funding for the final design of Churchill Avenue. So the state making substantial investment in the corridor and really being part of the solution to the grade separation question. And then the last thing I'll mention on this one is just that Caltrain has started a corridor crossing strategy, and really looking at the situation as having 20 different cities looking at individual grade separations. They're starting to come with the overlay of how does the entire corridor operate in this? How do we align how the projects are being planned? How do we streamline them? Where can they all kind of come together? So again, we're involved in that. We're not sort of the leading entity here, but we are very much following, making sure that we understand how each of these things fit together with what our needs are in the corridor. And then just to close out with some recent outreach updates. Over the course of last year, we've continued to engage the public. We think it's incredibly important to be out there and making people aware that the system is coming. The first question we get in Northern California is always, when can we ride a train? Essentially is the number one.
Same question in Southern California.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good. People are continuing to be excited because I think the idea of high-speed rail makes a lot of sense to people. So we've had over 4,400 folks that we've engaged through our tabling events. We've done over 40 presentations. We've done construction tours, and we've also been active on social media with all of our outreach efforts as well. And so just to give a few examples from the last kind of few months, this is our team out at the Benicia Farmers Market, the Burlingame Fresh Market. Those are kind of some of the tabling things that we do. And then some bigger events I mentioned the Caltrain electric train tour. So this was when they were showing off their new train sets. And you can see on the table there's a mock-up of a high-speed rail train set. So in your package, you should have gotten a fact sheet, which is our new high-speed rail train fact sheet that you can fold out. It folds together and creates one of the ones that's there. Of course, we're very excited for Bruce's actual trains to come, but this might have to do for now. And then the last one I'll mention here is the North Beach Festival, which was a huge event in San Francisco. So San Francisco's not dead, despite what you might have read and heard about in the news. But at that event, our staff over 2 days talked to 1,300 members of the public. One of them was actually the Lieutenant Governor, who saw our booth and stopped by to wish our team well and appreciated the work that they were doing out there. And then all of that also has been transformed into social media. And so we have a little video that we've put up from San Francisco Pride Festival. So if you click again, I think it should play, but let's see. It's beautiful. So anyways, that's a very short one that I think that's from Instagram, I believe, though I'm not quite the expert on that one. But we're continuing to be out there in the communities. And then just to give some of the highlights from our tours, we've been joined by a variety of folks. So some member Gail Pellerin and her staff were out with us. We had the mayors of Gilroy, Morgan Hill, and Santa Clara County Supervisor visit the Central Valley. And we actually met up with Director Perea at the graduation for the Selma Training Center. We had staff from various offices, legislative offices that we have in the region, Representative Costa, Ash Carlra, Kevin Mullen, who's now a Congress member. At the time, he was an Assembly member. And as well as staff from Dan Feinstein's office, Silicon Valley Leadership Group, MTC, and then some also our high school folks out of the Minetta Summer Transportation Institute and UC Berkeley planning graduate students. So we really take advantage of and work closely with Tony and Augie and others in Central Valley who are been kind enough to host our team as we bring folks down to give them an on the ground experience, understanding what the system starts to look like. And with that, that's my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Excellent report. Any questions? Yes. Jim.
Boris, under your awards, I think you missed something. There's 2023, 40, under 40.
So that happened yesterday. See, the PowerPoint was made a week ago, so we weren't allowed to say that. But I was part of the Mass Transit Magazine's 40 under 40 class that was just announced yesterday. So
Congratulations. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments, questions?
Real quick, Boris, first, thank you for your presentation. You're doing great work. Remind us or remind me our trains, will they be, how far north will they actually be traveling into the bay?
So the northern terminus is Salesforce Transit Center in San Francisco.
In San Francisco.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? No, if not, thank you. Excellent report. See you next August, if not before.
Whatever you'd like.
Put you on our August agenda, whether we meet or not. Oh, yes, thank you. So Member Arangula has arrived. Thank you very much for joining us. And we'll move to item number 4, the solar update. Margaret, hi.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Different heights.
yes.
From Boris, right?
But still, the closer you can speak to the mic, the better on these mics.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, happy to. So morning, it's a pleasure to see the board again. I know annually I'm usually here talking about our environmental, social, and governance topics underneath the umbrella of our sustainability program. And I'm pleased today to be able to take you through a more detailed update on one of our critical strategies, which is our approach to running the system entirely on renewable energy, really focused on a resilient and renewable power supply for the high-speed rail system. So let's go to the first slide. Since in 2008, of course, the board had the foresight to commit to a truly carbon-free high-speed rail travel experience. And over the course of the past decade, the board has maintained this very clear target. Next slide. So 100% clean renewable energy for operations is a very clear goal towards which to work. Staff effort has been on unpacking the details of including regulatory and statutory hurdles of a cost-effective approach, and the end goal of which has always been an optimal strategy for the authority that we can implement in time for train testing. Since 2008, of course, the regulatory context of renewable energy in the state has shifted considerably for state agencies as well as more broadly, and it's included advances in the technical context of renewable energy storage broadly, and it reflects the driver of climate resilience as well. I'd say California policy has increasingly focused on broad state decarbonization by 2045 with some interim milestones of 2035, towards which, of course, we're working to achieve this from day one. There's been a continued tight focus on utility-specific renewable energy requirements and electricity tariffs that accommodate the scale of high-speed rail have also emerged and evolved over this time period. So staff work has adjusted to these changes while keeping a very core focus on the 100% renewable energy goal for system operations. I'd say the other critical driver for staff work has been achieving this goal while also reducing operating costs, given the aim, of course, to operate the system without a subsidy. So there are a few ways that we can approach the operations of the system entirely on renewable energy. While the team has explored some standard power purchase agreements, as well as means of accessing the wholesale market, over the past several years, Given the broad trends on storage and generation and how they have coalesced, the team has been focused considerable detailed technical research on a behind the meter strategy that's been enabled by recent CPUC tariff policy. Next slide. So this strategy is informed by our unique assets. We have a property portfolio in an area with the best solar capacity in the world. We are in a state with a robust renewable energy and battery storage industry. We are a railroad that requires electricity so that we can reach the speeds of travel and hence the travel times that transform mobility in the state. And we're a very peak heavy load where in a state where electricity is expensive. So these opportunities and requirements and the board policy, which is of course very closely aligned with state policy and priorities, are the bedrock of this strategy. The behind the meter strategy is fairly simple and it relies on proven technology, which are brought together in a way that best serves our railroad. The strategy involves producing energy via solar photovoltaic arrays, which are located on well-configured parcels and connected to a battery energy storage system, both of which are connected to the traction power substation locations for the system and via these substations to the transmission grid interconnection points. Next slide. So the system sizing and layout are informed by performance characteristics that have been developed through extensive cross-functional staff collaboration. The functional teams across the authority have provided fundamental guidance on how parameters help the system achieve critical business objectives and statutory targets. So work with the rail operations team has provided clarity on the service plan and the necessary duration for battery storage. The rail systems engineering team has worked very closely to coordinate the technical elements at the traction power substation locations and to support the proper integration of these resources into the configured project. Our financial advisors and the financial services team have worked both to interrogate the financial modeling of the systems as well as the time period for payback and have an understanding of how these assist with reducing our operating expenses, while the legal team has provided valuable insight into statute, state code, tariff structures, and contractual interfaces. Our work with the right-of-way team and third-party and environmental teams have helped with the parcel review and clearance, and we have integrated this strategy into the configured project. Next slide. In addition to advancing the studies that are necessary in order for interconnection, the authority staff have conducted a thorough feasibility on the solar PV and battery energy storage systems consisting of 3 separate phases. So phase 1 was the creation of a comprehensive projection or model of the energy consumption at each traction power substation location in the Merced to Bakersfield corridor. And we've done that at 15-minute increments using the anticipated train model for the Merced to Bakersfield system, as well as the train schedule, the physics as well of that train route. In phase 2, we've determined an optimal grid interconnection configuration and tariffs to identify the best approach of working with the local utility grid, which is PG&E in the first segment. Phase 3 was the creation of detailed and refined projections of project economics using the tariffs and the rates provided by the local electric utility to confirm the financial viability of the proposed projects. We've also done a detailed analysis of the authority's right-of-way portfolio within the first 119 miles of construction for the suitability of parcels for energy generation. And to date, this analysis has focused on solar generation given the project's location in the Central Valley. Though, of course, as we move out into the rest of the state, we'll also be looking at wind and other renewable energy generation options. So this geographic information systems-based analysis looked for parcels that were greater than 5 acres and were of a very good configuration, which is code for it. They were mostly square or rectangular, and that were in proximity to the traction power substation locations. We also screened the parcels to make sure that there were no fatal environmental flaws, including locations in floodplains and slope issues as well. So understanding the authority's operations profile, including the requirements for system reliability, has also been a part of sizing these assets. The battery energy storage can supply resilience for the system in the event of a grid outage. So these battery energy storage facilities combined with the solar photovoltaic system enables uninterrupted rail service in the summer months and sufficient hours of backup power in winter to maintain rail service. So on the next slide, you'll see, that slide came out funny. This is an illustration of the modeled load against the generation capacity. So the team have utilized the technical and business requirement inputs to size the battery storage adjacent to the TPSS stations. And this graph really illustrates the benefit of solar paired with battery storage. Shows how combining these two together at the right size and configuration to match our load over the course of the year has additional capacity in summer. And the sizing also ensures that we have a minimum of 6 hours of backup power to be provided even in winter conditions, when the solar PV system would be anticipated to produce probably the least amount of energy, depending on the weather. On the next slide, you'll see that the sizing of the strategy provides some vital benefits to the authority. First and foremost, it reduces our annual energy-related operating expenses to the tune of 75%, or an annual savings of something between $10 and $14 million. It also provides us with a reserve source of power, which is critical in the event of grid shutoffs. And in turn, this provides grid benefits as well. We're providing a much more balanced load profile to the grid thanks to the smoothing of the service phase. We're creating the opportunity to support the grid during times of high congestion. Our system can prevent brownouts and blackouts through coordination with PG&E to use the battery storage and the solar PV resources to supply capacity to the grid during those times when energy is most in demand, which is roughly 4 to 9 p.m., certainly in the summer and in the winter as well. Of course, this significantly reduces our peak demand, which I know everyone understands helps to reduce our energy costs writ large. And it reduces the load overall to the transmission system. And it significantly reduces the intermittency of that load and the generation. I know that is another classic complaint around renewable energy. So using the batteries to store and then release that energy as required presents a much more even load profile to the grid. On the next slide. Over the past decade, the authority has engaged with core stakeholders, most specifically and most intensively with PG&E, the independent-owned utility operator for the first segment, as well as with regulatory bodies, including the California Independent Systems Operator, to make sure that the required technical resources are meeting their requirements, as well as with the California Public Utilities Commission, who oversee policy relative to tariffs and rate structures. We also coordinate with state agencies on matters of state policy and technical exchange, and this includes working with the California Energy Commission, with the Department of General Services, and with GOBIS. On the next slide. To advance the strategy in the next year includes several core activities. We will be working to adjust the power load model to flexibly and quickly accommodate consideration of shifting drivers. So as the authority moves into considering procurement options, an updated model actually allows us to explore a range of configurations, and it allows us to adjust the model parameters quickly in response to industry information, as well as updated authority information such as train sets and the train loads, and to communicate that model to prospective contractors and bidders. The model will also cover the whole state as we've been refining the environmental alignments and selecting locally preferred alternatives. And we have updated clarity as well on the service models coming out of the business plan work. And of course, we will be continuing to look at wind and other generation opportunities. We'll also be confirming a procurement strategy. I've mentioned that staff across functional areas are in regular consultation on the specific technical dynamics of the behind the meter strategy. And we're considering the optimal procurement methods, including the standard range of procurement opportunities. This work also considers interfaces among those contracts and optimizing these to minimize both technical and financial risk to the authority. And we'll be seeking sources of funding. I know in May of 2023, as CFO Annis discussed in June of 2023 at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, we actually applied for a Department of Energy Grid Resilience and Innovation, or GRIP program. Given the unique nature of high-speed rail and its behind-the-meter strategy, as well as given the operational cost benefit that comes with a capital investment, the authority has sought these new funding capital dollars to support the strategy. And staff will continue to explore potential funding opportunities as they arise. Next slide. So in summary, the work ahead continues across functional areas of the authority, and it incorporates more mature information about the system. It's going to include the entire phase 1 alignment we'll have more details on stations and other facilities and understanding how those interplay with the overall traction power system opportunity. We'll be reviewing and refining the resource sizing to understand the matching of our demand with renewables on a more granular, including an hourly basis. And then we'll be investigating additional value opportunities for revenue, including financial opportunities associated with recent federal legislation. Thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for the opportunity to review the renewable energy strategy in summary with you.
Well, we thank you. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for the presentation and thanks for the briefing yesterday. There was a lot of good information. Is there anywhere in the country or in the world where there's a train system or a high-speed rail system that's 100% electrified?
100% electrified, yes. There are many examples of entirely electric rail systems, both in the US and globally.
Okay, for example?
For example, SEPTA in Philadelphia, the electric rail system in Germany and Italy and Spain and France, parts of the United Kingdom, Japan, Korea.
Okay, and they're powered by solar?
Oh, they're powered by
I apologize, I
electricity.
missed it.
Yes, in terms of renewable energy, many of those operators are looking at solar and battery or renewable energy tied with battery storage in order to provide additional resilience capacity. In London, the UK systems are looking at resilience supply tied to battery storage and solar. And in Germany, they're also looking at additional, it's kind of about half of the level of capacity we're looking at. And that is also to help with their goal of reducing the carbon emissions associated with their electricity.
Okay, and as we move to the December 2028 testing of our trains, how is what you're doing interfaces with the presentation Bruce made and that chart on page 4 that talked about these 4 folks who'll be bringing on to oversee all these packages to make sure that everything works?
Right, great question. It interfaces with the traction power aspect of those packages. So we've been working very closely for the past several years to really make sure that the proposed solution relative to the batteries and the solar interconnects specifically in a technical manner with the traction power substation.
Okay, the last question is at what point are we confident in the decision of 100% solar versus do we need to have PG&E electrifying our system, et cetera, so we don't lose time?
Oh, of course. So we're pursuing both of those. We're in active conversation and engaged in active research with PG&E on the traction power interconnection points. And so we tie to the PG&E grid. The solar and battery resources provide us with a means of reducing our peak demand. And they also provide us with a means of backup power. And so ideally we draw on our batteries. And so we're not drawing expensive electricity. And over time, we match that load completely one-to-one.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? And anyone on the phone, Chair Richards or Vice Chair Miller? Any questions or comments?
Just a great
No?
presentation by both staff. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Margaret, I want to, as the resident historian, I want to give you a historical factoid. Deep roots with this authority board, of course, but even going back to 1981, when I first presented this to Governor Brown and his chief of staff, Gray Davis, was in the room. And one of their first questions was, can this be powered by clean energy? So that's we didn't have the knowledge we have today, but that's what they were thinking back then too. So thank you very much.
Of course, thank you.
Okay. Before we get to the CEO report, Mr. Camacho, you had a report you wanted to share with us?
Yes, it'll be a somewhat of a brief report, but I just wanted to let the board know that I was invited to attend a team meeting of CP4 up in Bakersfield. And I guess the 2 real takeaways that I came back is the enduring heat of 110 degrees that they have to work in. But secondly, I was able to introduce myself and met each one of the team members with CP4. And I was so impressed by, number one, their enthusiasm and the sense of pride that they had in working on this project. And from the project engineer to the program leader that they had, each one of them were just beaming with pride. And they said that they wanted to be part of this legacy, that one day either they or their kids will be able to ride high-speed rail. And I was very, very impressed by that. The working conditions are less than desirable, but I'll tell you, they were there plugging, doing the right thing. And I just thought I'd like to share that because we talked about, their last comments as I left was saying, we want to ride high-speed rail. And I compliment them for that and thank them on behalf of the board. Thank you.
Thank you for going there in the heat and thank you for the report. All right, we'll now have the CEO report presented by the CFO from our C-suite.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to present the CEO report on behalf of Brian Kelly. Just a few items to cover today. On the next slide, you'll see that the authority's been very active in submitting new federal grant applications. So we did submit 2 in August. The first was for a program called the Wildlife Crossings Pilot Program, which is a new federal program. We applied for $2 million to cover about cover about 80% of the $2.5 million cost of a monitoring activity, which we're committed to do with our resource agencies. As part of our 119-mile construction project, we actually have over 300 wildlife crossings along that corridor. And one of the primary species that we'll be monitoring is the kit fox. So we're hoping to partner with the federal government on this 5-year program of monitoring. It's not just academic. The hope is that in studying these over 300 crossings for 5 years, and these crossings do have variable design at variable locations that will be better informed in building future animal crossings that may occur at state highways or future high-speed rail segments to better serve the crossings of wildlife along the corridor. The second one is in the federal program called shorthand is MEGA for Mega Project. And there we're asking for $232 million for a project with total cost of $386 million. I think that's a 60-40 maximum federal contribution program. And that's for the Merced Integrated Multimodal Station. We think that'll be a competitive project scope for this mega program. We have consulted with the US DOT and FRA over the past year to find out, what's really optimal for the criteria they consider for that program. And we think that Merced Integrated Station is a good match. The federal program is multimodal. The Merced Station's multimodal. Will have the ACE commuter system connect there. The Amtrak service will connect there as well as high-speed rail into that rail union station serving those 3 rail operators, as well as community and regional bus services. So we're excited about that one. That was just submitted, I believe, on Monday of this week. So that one's freshly submitted. And on the general grant area, we are looking to have a federal decision on our CRISI grant applications probably over the next month. There were 2 there. One was to fund grade separations in the city of Shafter. And the second one was for the Selma Workforce Center to receive another 2 years of funding for that program through the federal grant. Next slide. The authority has opened a number of structures so far in 2023, and they're listed here. Merced Avenue, McCombs Road are both CP4. Elkhorn Avenue, Idaho Avenue, Dover Avenue are in CP23, and Cedar Viaduct, of course, in CP1. And if we go to the next slide, the 7th is Poso Avenue undercrossing. I'm not sure if this is a video or not. It is a video. All right.
The opening of the Poso Avenue. Great
So
celebration.
there you
Wow.
see our birthday
I couldn't
boy
be happier
CEO.
with nowhere I'd rather be right now.
This is something that's long overdue. We've had a railroad crossing here for years. That all railroad crossings are dangerous, especially when you put it in an area that's high traffic like this. And so to have this underpass open, it's a really good thing for the city of Wasco.
This will provide an additional traffic outlet for Highway 43 off to my right and around under the railroad tracks to Highway 46. So an important link for the town.
This project will be great for the community. It's great for us. Our trains will pass through here without having any intersection with the vehicles because we're going to be above them. And it's safe for the community. It's safe for us. And it's just a great day. These are the kinds of moments that you love when you're in this job.
Great. So
Thank you.
In addition to Poso Avenue, the first two, Merced Avenue, McCombs Road, if you look closely at the pictures, both of those have existing freight tracks at the grade separations, also separated from road traffic. And I asked staff to look at the federal databases on collisions with trains that have occurred at those three locations. And the federal database goes back about 50 years, but at those three locations, there's been 6 collisions with trains over that 50 years, resulting in 2 fatalities, 2 injuries, and 2 property damage only collisions. So 6 collisions overall. So these are definitely huge safety benefits for those communities not to have that risk of at-grade collisions anymore. Lastly, some of you were able to meet before this meeting started. We're joined here by Ben Belknap, who's our new Inspector General. for
Stand up,
High-Speed
Ben.
Rail.
Let's, welcome.
So Mr. Belknap was appointed by the governor recently. We think he'll be officially sworn in as 1st of September. He has vast experience from a career working at the California State Auditor's Office, and he was a deputy state auditor there most recently. The Inspector General position, of course, was created by Senate Bill 198 that the legislature passed in 2022, concurrent with approving the remainder of our 4.2 billion of bond funds. So Mr. Belknap it was appointed now to a 4-year term. And so we look forward to having him start in early September.
Great. Thank you.
And that concludes the CEO report.
Any questions or comments for Brian?
I was just gonna say a personal welcome, maybe sort of on behalf of the board, but also say that I think it would be very useful for us as a board to hear from you from time to time, whether that's, on some regular basis annually or, at least twice a year, just in terms of your work and your observations with respect to, I know you don't report to us, but I think it would be useful for us to hear from you as you will also interact, I'm sure, with the legislature and the governor's office.
Excellent suggestion. Yes. Any other comments?
I have one
questions?
question
Yes,
for
Henry.
Mr. Kim. Brian, is that okay? We have him come up. And as you're coming up, I just wanted to thank you too for the briefing we had yesterday. It cleared a lot of things up in my mind.
Absolutely.
But as we heard all the pieces today and heading for that December 2028 date to run trains, of course, and then we have a July 2026 for substantial completion of CP1. I've been focused for several months now just on all the challenges that we have on third-party issues. And as we look at your chart on page 9 of our report that we get as a board for the Central Valley Status Report, we have about 508 utility issues that are either not started or in progress. And I know we don't need all of those completed to hit our 26th date. But our discussion, if you could just briefly tell the board what the plans are, what are the critical paths? What do we need to have done before the end of this year and then moving forward so that we hit this date and where you're at with it?
Absolutely. So thank you. Dennis Kim, I'm the Director of Real Property and the lead executive for third parties. It's nice to see the board again. But I want to commend Board Member Perea, and he reached out to us about utility relocation. It's admirable because you're trying to really understand where we are and how we're going to progress
Right.
and how we are progressing, right? So to that question is we do have utility. I want to make a statement about utilities. It is a very difficult area. Just the way it actually is. There's just so many standards that the utility owners have, and there's so many variables that you actually have to clear in terms of predecessor activities, such as design. You have environmental clearance, you have right-of-way acquisition, you have land conveyances, you have work plans, crossing applications, pre-construction walkthroughs. There's so many activities you have to clear, and if you don't clear, if you clear 7 out of 8, you still can't advance. So I want to, really inform the board that we are hyper-focused on identifying every single predecessor for every single conflict to allow us to move forward in a very expedient manner, right? So currently, I did talk to Board Member Perea and briefed him yesterday, but we have, foundational elements that we're going through to try to get faster utility relocation. What I mean by that is understanding the entire scope of what we have to do for utilities, structuring our organization to make sure that we're enhancing and meeting those needs, but more importantly, tracking all of this very detailed oriented in terms of every single activity, the date of every single predecessor that needs to be cleared. So to answer your question is, utilities are very difficult, but when there's difficulty, you need a lot more detail to it.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We have issue logs, we have escalation logs that we track daily to make sure that we're able to advance these utilities as quickly as we can. So to that point, we're moving, there are 96 critical utilities for CP1 that are for the top 4 paths, critical paths for CP1. And we're tracking those very closely, each of them very closely. There's 9 of those on Belmont that are scheduled to close between October and December of this year. And we have 74 utilities in 2024 that are critical to CP1 that we're also tracking. So you're going to see a lot of movement in 2024 of those critical activities at Belmont, Herndon, Church, and McKinley. And that's really the top 4 paths in terms of our construction for utilities.
Yeah. Okay.
Right,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank-
And I have to say, I have tremendous confidence in the team Brian's put together, led by Mr. Kim on this project. It's been such a challenge for us, past 10 years or so. And, I think watching this board before I became a board member and then being a board member, it was always frustrating to see or hear when it was too late to pivot.
Right.
And saying, oh gosh, delay or additional costs because of that delay. And I think what we're going to see now, other than getting the job done, I think what we're going to see is if we need to pivot, we're not going to be here at the last minute till too late. There's nothing we can do. I think staff will be here saying, this is not working. We need to do X, and then we can move that through. But
Yeah.
I think these 96 that you've identified of these 500, and I'm just talking about CP1. If
Right,
you look
right,
at
right.
CP 2, 3, 4, there's issues there too.
Exactly.
But to get to that 119, I think this is what we have to get done to get that operational.
Yeah, and to your point, I want to give an example of CP4 on that point. Is semi-tropic, there is a P1030 canal. CEO Kelly, COO Casey and I went there 3 weeks ago from today. That's when the Poso underpass actually was announced. And we went to the site of P1030, and it's as big as a small river. We're not talking about small utilities. We're talking about large canals, infrastructure that is highly important to semi-tropic, the stakeholder. And what we found there, to your point, is there's always adjustment. You have to mitigate. And what we found there was we actually designed it to have 2 cofferdams and a bypass system to work. However, due to the cracking that happened in the canal itself over time, which is natural, the utility owner didn't actually want us to proceed until we actually ended the harvest season because it was too much of a risk for them. But with that being said, is the team, the great team, the help of HNTB, CRB, the authority team, we actually created a very large concrete a box culvert that I've never seen a bunker, but I'll tell you, it is massive, right? And if anyone has seen a bunker, I'd love you to come with me to fact check that because I've never seen one, but it is massive. It's already created. We're ready to go. Once the harvest season ends, we're able to actually advance that work quickly, right? So those are the mitigation measures the team takes. You know, to Board Member Camacho's point, is CP4 is a great team. They continue to press through all adversity.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. very
Thank
much.
you very much for that, Mr. Kim. Thank you, Mr. Perea. I think we have a very brief F&A committee report. Mr. Camacho?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The F&A reported out, and it'll be a brief report, as I was forewarned by our chairwoman that had to be within 2 minutes. Cash management report, the authority is in a strong cash position and total cash available is about $3.2 billion. Maybe we could stop with that and just say that's the end of the report, but actually there's a little more. Individual fund balances for Prop 1A is 793 million. Cap and trade is 2.4 billion. Real property 11.6. Cap and trade auction proceeds from May auction have yet not to be reflected in the cash. Capital outlay budget is the monthly expenditures were about 145 million. Total design build expenditures 96.9 million in total. Preliminary monthly expenditures for June were 254 million. And this is up primarily due to a year-end accrual and bookend projects. Total design build build expenditures for June were 97.5 million. Contingency summary as of the end of May, the authority has 2.1 billion remaining contingency specifically for CP packages, CP1 at 878 million, CP23 1.1 billion, CP4 120 million. Right away, in terms of the Central Valley, right away, total parcels delivered through April were 2,225 out of 2,293, which is 90%, 97%, which is very, very good. It's welcome news. But we still seem to struggle with the utility relocations. And I think that we've talked about this quite a bit. We had 11 relocations were completed during the reporting period. Completed were 1,045, which is 57%. In progress, there's 376, which is 20%. Approved to start 12, which is 1%. Not started were 403, which is 22% of the total. CP4 construction or CP construction progress structures 7 out of 93 or 75% are underway or substantially complete. CP4 11 out of 11 structures are substantially complete, which is good. Guideways 90 out of 119, 76%. And underway or constructed. There's no change from the prior date. And I was under my time limit,
You
so
sure were. You have
that completes my
12
report.
seconds left to there. Any questions or comments for Mr. Camacho? No, hearing none, no other business. Chair Richards and Vice Chair Miller, we wish you safe travels. And with that, we are adjourned. Got to do it
See you
again.
all. Thank you. Take care.